can see it. All righty. Welcome everybody to another live podcast. This Week in Drones, coming to you every Thursday, right here, same time, same place. Excited for another incredible conversation today with our friend of the podcast, CEO of Ondas Holdings, Eric Brock. We're going to be deep diving into scaling what he calls sovereign infrastructure related to drones and counter UAS. And so we'll deep dive that. We're also going to reference Part 108, the BV loss NPRM that just hit the street this week. That's kind of all the buzz right now across LinkedIn and all of our networks. Everyone's trying to read it and deep dive it and digest it. And so we'll reference that a little bit, what that might mean for the industry from Eric's perspective and his companies. With that said, I'm your host, David Lewin, providing airspace awareness with high-resolution radar with Echodyne, joined by my co-host, Michelle Anduquette. She's the CEO of 3 Mad Air. She's a drone and AAM consultant serving the aviation industry across the U.S., decades of aviation safety and regulatory compliance, and an advocate for responsible integration of UAS into the airspace. And she talks a lot about interoperability as well. And so I'm glad to have her and her perspective and questions as we go through talking with Eric. And then I'll pass it to you in a second, Eric, but I just wanted folks to know Eric is the CEO of Ondas Holdings. It's a company that's quietly positioning itself as a key player in the next era of autonomous infrastructure, something that we're going to get into in more detail here. Under Eric's leadership, Ondas has grown from a wireless connectivity company into a multi-platform powerhouse. They combine drones, counter UAS, and modular systems into something that Eric calls sovereign infrastructure. So we're reframing and we're bringing, you guys are bringing some incredible new approaches to this whole space. I want to pass it to you, Eric, let you share a little bit more history in a few words here, and then we'll deep dive into the discussion.
Excellent. Well, thank you, David. I'm really happy to be here. I'll start by just saying that I am a big fan of the podcast and what you've been building here. It's you, it's Michelle, your other co-hosts and guests. What you're doing on behalf of the business is really invaluable. Providing the education and the content. So again, I'm really happy to be here. So just as by way of background, I am the founder of Ondas Holdings. The chairman and CEO. I've been at the helm here for about 8 years. Prior to Ondas, I was actually on the other side of the table. I was an investor, and before that, I was a banker. So I spent a number of years on Wall Street, as they say. But again, I've been doing this now for 8 years at Ondas. Ondas is a publicly traded company listed on the NASDAQ. We are small cap, but we have invested hundreds of millions of dollars to develop what I believe are some really important technologies and capabilities. We focus this on critical markets. They range from defense and homeland security to public safety and critical infrastructure. So we are a dual-use company, providing wireless networks to those critical markets, as you mentioned. Most of our conversation today, however, will focus on our autonomous drone platforms that we're providing as infrastructure for aerosecurity and intelligence. Essentially, what we're doing with these technology platforms are protecting populations in critical locations. And I'll just add, in my intro here, that under the Ondas Holdings umbrella, we have 2 operating businesses and subsidiaries, wholly owned subsidiaries. There's American Robotics based in Baltimore, Maryland, and then we have Robotics, which is based outside of Tel Aviv, Israel. So again, thrilled to be here. Look forward to the conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And folks, remember, we are streaming live. So if you have comments, questions, and thoughts, as Eric mentioned, his background and perspective on all things from, hardware, technology, software, ecosystems, investments into this industry. And we'll get a little bit into, again, Part 108 and what that means for real world deployment, how to scale both commercially and in defense markets. So if you have thoughts, questions on some of these things, feel free to send those in. We love the dialogue here. And with that, if you're wondering what smart money sees in the drone and counter UAS ecosystems, or what comes after prototypes and pilot programs, then this is a conversation that you guys don't want to miss. We're going to deep dive here. We're going to kind of kick off with thinking about part 108. But before we do, Eric, I just wanted to pull up. I was watching the FAA press conference the other day, and I noticed at least one, but I think there are two, if the folks out there can determine where the second incognito drone is here. But I wanted you to tell us, for anyone who is watching this stream live, American Robotics was highlighted here, and one of your other companies that I couldn't see when I was looking at this. But tell us about this, what we see on the screen here.
Absolutely. Yeah, David, thanks for showing this. So I'll just start by saying we were very pleased to see that both of our drone platforms, the Optimus system UAV and our Iron Drone Raider, were prominently displayed at this press conference hosted by the Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy. And I'll say that the press conference itself, and we're going to talk a bit about Part 108 in the future, but it was obviously a big event for the industry, really a historic day. And I just want to acknowledge with the hard work that we've done as an industry to get to this point. I mean, there's been massive work on so many dimensions, and now we're here, right? So, but yeah, let me just tell you briefly. We have those are our two drones. On the left, you have the Optimus system that's used for. Oh, first, I'll just say both Optimus and Iron Drone are fully autonomous drone platforms. They are deployed to protect critical locations and populations, deployed as infrastructure, so they're housed in docking stations. The Optimus is used for perimeter security, emergency response, DFR, right, drone as first responder type use cases, and inspection and mapping. So a very versatile platform, operational, reliable, autonomous. The Iron Drone system is a newer platform we've introduced. And what the Iron Drone does is protect from the threat of hostile drones or intruder drones. And what we do in layered security here, and of course, Echodyne and others play a really important part in this layered security. But we're the tool that can mitigate the threat or intercept the hostile drones. So in any event, that's what we have, and we were, had the pleasure and the privilege really to have them displayed at this important press conference.
Wonderful, man. I really appreciate it. That's awesome. Yeah. I hear that you guys had strategically moved some offices right there nearby, and that you got a call like early in the morning. That was great. You know, well done on that placement.
That's right.
And good to see you out there, Carl. Richard, thanks for the comments, everybody. Again, we are streaming live, so send in your additional questions there. And so let's dive into the conversation. We're going to start by talking big picture about Part 108 and the policy tailwinds that our industry is seeing, and a little bit about kind of scaling the operations within that. And Michelle, I know we kind of talked about, you and I have been talking quite a lot about Part 108, but I wondered if you wanted to kick this section off, if you don't mind, just to kind of throw in that first question.
Not at all. So there's a whole lot that is coming out of this NPRM, Eric. What did we say? 700-ish pages that I have not read word for word, David, but I have skimmed it. So just in general, we know it's going to impact how people have been planning, right? How we have been putting our business plans together, and what assumptions we've been making along the way in lieu of having this kind of framework be put out. So, Eric, I wonder if you have had a chance yet to think about how this NPRM language might affect what you currently have in place.
So, of course, I'll just start by saying that, the signal here from the FAA is important, but more broadly, we're seeing a host of, I'll say policymakers. So policymakers and regulators, really making a deliberate effort here to recognize the progress we've made as an industry. And I think the policy and regulations are going to become increasingly supportive. And it's really what we're seeing here is a recognition that technologies have matured. Right, we've spent a lot of time and energy in creating these technologies. We've been demonstrating the safety and the safe deployment and operations of these systems and capabilities. So, this has really been a critical step. And I do think that we've kind of hit an inflection point, and this is just hugely bullish. So, Michelle, where should I take that?
Well, just, in your opinion, what do you think this is going to do? I mean, is it giving guidance, or is it giving people encouragement, or do you think that it's we're at a point now where we're kind of past the applied research and we're into the learn by doing phase, and it's like
Well,
in
yeah,
line.
yeah, I think we're past the learn by doing phase. And in fact, I think, from my seat, we can quibble about what the final rules are going to be. And we don't know, right? As David said, we've got comment periods and there's going to be a lot of back and forth and a lot of people are going to have an opinion. But I think, from my seat, what I do believe strongly is we're going to take a lot of the hurdles away that have been kind of a bottleneck for growth in maturity, or the maturation of our industry. So again, we've got technology, check. We have now customers, right? Customers have been spending a lot of time with us in the field collectively to validate the safety, validate the value that our capabilities are bringing to their businesses, their operations, to the economy. And now we're going to be checking the box with regulations. So I don't quibble so much about what the outcomes are be specifically. I'm sure some will be disappointed, some will be thrilled, but directionally, there's going to be a massive improvement in debottlenecking what we do, and we're going to see a lot of growth as a result.
So how do you think that plays out for the different kind of operations that Ondas and its subsequent companies are serving right now, like port security or the prisons, or how's that going to play out for you?
Well, I think it's broad. I mean, I think almost all of these end markets you think about are ready. And at the same time, I'll say, if I connect it back to Ondas and those security and intelligent platforms we have, there's a lot of low hanging fruit. So we might have a bit of an advantage. I don't think it's significant in the context of we've got massive markets that are only barely penetrated, right? So for
Mhm.
all of us, we're going to be able to see, we're going to fly more than we did the year before, and in fact, dramatically more. And this is the beginning of a multi-year cycle. So the issue is, I don't think we should be. I think we need to remind ourselves, okay, that today we've had these constraints. Again, we're checking the box in technology. Customer adoption is ready. Regulations are now becoming more permissive. But we don't have to have, the day after Part 108 is ratified, a million drones in the air, right? There's going to be a process. We're going to have to build the scalability of what we do. But for all of us involved in this, the transition from a small, almost kind of, development type industry to a real thriving and successful and valuable growth industry, every year it's going to get better and better. And it's going to be a pretty steep slope. So that's going to create tremendous opportunity. So again, we don't have to be scaled the next day. Getting there is kind of, starting that process is what we've been working for many, many years.
So it's a new kind of learn by doing. We're going to be doing something different now, more than what we have been doing.
That's right. So for most of us, we've been spending the last 5-10 years, some of us more, in developing technology, right? Incredibly complex technology, right? Deep technology, the integration of software, hardware, then deploying that in the field. We've been doing through many, many iterations. But now we have new challenges, and that challenge is how do we build businesses around technology platforms, right? And again, there's tons of opportunities, but there's also more new challenges that we're going to have, and I think that's what we have to do. It's a good characterization, Michelle. It's learn by doing on putting the companies together. But we have to start getting organized to do that now. I was talking in another group, maybe a few weeks ago, and we're kind of the dog that caught the bus. Right. We wanted to get the FAA in this position. We wanted to get these permissions to fly at more and more scale. But now, how do we do it? How do we operationalize and deliver these incredible capabilities to customers who can really, receive the value of, that they provide?
Absolutely. I did want to throw in there, with Part 108 and eventually this established regulation that will kind of create the infrastructure here, or the regulatory structure. Do you feel like that even hitting the street in draft right now, do you think that gives institutional buyers more confidence, even, to like double down on the investments to see this scale? Just the fact that the FAA is indicating that they're supporting operations at scale for drones. I'm just curious from like the investment standpoint, if you see a shift there, or how Part 108, the NPRM hitting the street may impact investment today.
I think it's huge, David. It's really, really, really significant. And again, I'll come back to it. Is the investor expectation isn't okay? The regulations are fixed, and all of a sudden we have big companies, right? And it doesn't happen overnight. But if you're an investor in the drone sector, it's been a struggle. It's been a struggle for the companies, because what we do on the development side for these technologies is really hard. There's timelines involved. There's this learn by doing, on the development side. There's failures, right? And and it's difficult. It takes a lot of talent, takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, takes a lot of money. At the same time, a lot of the folks who've been investing in our sector have been doing so, really focused on initially technology risk. Okay. And that means, can that management team take their vision around the product and the services that we're creating and turn that into something that the customers want to adopt, right? We're in many, many places, right? Ondas is one example, but there's many of us who are doing that and now have, technology platforms that are scalable. And for the investor standpoint, after pouring all this money and taking all this technology development risk, the next question was, okay, when can I turn that into revenue growth? When can I turn that into operating profits so I can get a return on capital? And that's been a really hard question to answer, because again, we've got some constraints on the regulatory side. How do we do this at scale and put that steep growth curve? And now that that's been de-risked, it really comes back to the management teams and the companies themselves. Okay, how do you convince that investment capital that you can put together that operating platform, right, to deliver that technology, those services, those capabilities in a way that the customers can accept them and adopt them, and you can do that, profitably.
Michelle?
So you talked about what's changed, and we've talked a little bit about how 108 is playing into that change. What do you think that, as we are looking towards the future, we're getting into a dual use game like never before? So for the Ondas Holdings companies,
Mhm.
are you seeing that this shift is affecting you, and are you looking towards that direction now?
Yeah, absolutely. But I want to unpack that a little bit and really talk about what dual use means.
Mhm.
So, and I'll make a distinction. Okay, dual use technology platforms are what they are, right? Not every drone is going to be relevant to military, homeland security, public safety, and say commercial markets like delivery. Right. So, there's a lot of drones that will do something. They're designed for purpose for a specific application, and that's great. So I don't think we should feel like, we have to build drones that are capable of doing everything or even multiple things. With that said, there's certain markets, and we happen to be in them around, security in particular, that you can have platforms that are relevant for multiple markets. So take our Optimus system. Our Optimus system can be deployed to provide perimeter security around a military base, or say a border, checkpoint. That same system can be deployed to, say at a critical location like a rail yard, a maritime port, a data center, to provide that perimeter security, but also emergency response. We can also, on that same system, do inspection and surveying, right, with different payloads, and we've automated all that. So this is really a dual-use platform. At the same time,
Say a little bit more before you go on, Eric. Say a little bit more about what you mean by you've automated it.
well, we've automated. So the Optimus system is installed as infrastructure.
This is my favorite part, by the way.
Yeah, so in infrastructure, and it's available 24/7, and it's multifunction. So how do we have this system can do all these various applications and be constantly available? Well, we have in our docking station, it's very sophisticated. It's ruggedized. It's able to be deployed in virtually every environment, hot, cold, dusty, you name it. And we put it out there, and we've got a robotic arm in this docking station so we can swap batteries and payloads. Swapping the batteries means we can go on our mission, we come back, we land. By the way, we land every time reliably, and then we swap a battery. We're immediately available for critical security services, right? Swap the battery, we can go right back out. We're doing this today in Dubai for drone as first responder use cases, so public safety. And we've been doing it for 3 years now as infrastructure. It's a fleet of drones, all drone infrastructure with drones being remotely operated from a single remote control operating center, right? But then with that, we can also, in this Optimus system, swap payloads. So the core use case is for a system like this is that security. It's a video payload. But we can also swap in sensors, thermal, LiDAR sensor. We can even put deliver emergency first aid kits, for example, with the system.
So as long as it fits in the box, you can swap that payload.
Yeah, exactly. So that's multiple functions. So again, this is a dual use technology. But with that said, I'll just be very candid. If you have say a strip mall where you want to provide security or any one of those functions, our system is going to be overkill, right? It's too much. So what I would say is at the the very high ends for those type of applications, the Optimus is great and it's a dual use system. But if I can then take us one step further, if you're an investor or you're on the board of directors or the leadership team of a company like Ondas or many other drone companies, you can think about it as well as being a dual use company, right? Because I'll make the assertion that the future of this drone of the drone economy, if these markets are as big as we all believe they are, and they are, we can have a separate conversation around that. But we know these markets are huge, but they're also complex to address. It's not just the technology that's complex; it's how you put your operating company, the field support and services, the supply chain. All of that requires scale to do it at a profitable level. So if every single drone you saw was a company, right? One company, one drone, very quickly you realize that investment in operations doesn't scale, right? The path to profitability on a single revenue stream is very, very difficult. So what I would say is, and this is up for debate. Some people believe in extreme focus. We are a military drone. We have an ISR drone, or an attritable drone, or we're a logistics drone, and they want to be extremely focused. And we can have a good debate about that. But if I look at the future and we say we're going to do this at scale, in the cost to deliver the service, right? That operating expenses you have, scaling them is critical. And dual use companies provide you the biggest TAM out there, the biggest markets. And there's so much economies of scope around how you put the field services, how you do supply chain, the drone expertise you can bring. So I make the argument that dual use technologies are valuable, but dual use companies at the end of the day are likely to be the most valuable.
So let's put this in the context of your sovereign infrastructure and the addition of the 108 NPRM. And if you could address two sectors within this ecosystem, the investors and the operators or the companies, what would you advise them right now? I mean,
okay,
we're in a changing world every day, it seems, but I think those two, between the EOs and the 108 NPRM, we have changed the way we think again, or we have that opportunity. What advice would you give the companies, and then what advice would you give the investors?
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I think the advice, there's really not a line between what's in the interest of investors and companies, right? Because all of us who are developing technology are making that transition. How do we operationalize? How do we scale our service delivery? And we all need money to do it. We all need growth capital, right? Different than early stage technology development capital. So if you want to earn the right to deploy growth capital, right, to have investors back you, you have to put together a compelling business plan. And I think more often than not, we're going to see that, there's going to be consolidation. right? So you have to look at yourself in the mirror if you're a CEO or a board member and you're having conversations with investors, and you have to be able to convince yourself if you have a single platform that what you're doing is so compelling. And by the way, there will be a bunch of folks who are able to do this. I just don't think all of us will, right? So, but you may be there may be a handful of companies, a small percentage of our industry that says, okay, one platform, one revenue stream, I can put the operating expense and operating capital together to get to a very compelling return for our investors. Well, that's great. But many of us are going to have to take the other tact. And the other really fascinating thing here when we talk about the sovereign infrastructure, like what does that mean? I think what we're seeing and it's fascinating because this becomes very quickly into the geopolitical in dual use conversations, is that as we're transitioning towards adoption and growth, we're faced with the reality that we have to localize everything we do. And this is particularly true on what I would say government levered businesses and technology platforms like we have. But we're making America great again. That is policy, and that has real implications for our industry. If we and in our industry at the same time is global. Right, there's many U.S. companies, but there's European, there's drone companies all over the world who are doing really special things. But if you want to sell in the U.S., you have to have your supply chain here. You have to deliver more often than not, the services from U.S. citizens, right? So you have to have a team, a sales and marketing team. You have to have the field support, trusted, localized operators, and that's what the customers are going to demand. That always is what national policy is going to demand. Now, if you kind of say, okay, well that's pretty simple. We all know that, Eric. Now let's put your CFO's hat on. We've made this massive investment in technology. We can address all these markets globally. Why don't we want to monetize this in Europe and elsewhere? And of course we do. What that means is if you want to monetize it outside of the U.S. and vice versa for European or other companies, technology providers, service providers, if they want to do in the U.S., we have to make the investments in Europe as American companies to scale. We have to localize there, and vice versa. Europeans, if they have a really attractive platform, they have to make these investments in the U.S. Right? They have to access the U.S. supply chain. They have to become American companies. So what does that mean? That is even a more compelling case to consolidate this industry and use capital efficiently.
That's good. Yeah, and actually one of the questions I was meaning to ask as well, and I think you just touched on it a bit, was just how a lot of companies in the sector are kind of at early stage kind of chasing growth at any cost, but you guys and Ondas Holdings and your subsidiaries have stayed lean while you're building. And I guess the question is just how do you balance long-term value creation with short-term capital discipline in this environment?
Yeah, good question, David. So I guess I'll say, chasing growth at any cost. I think we, from an investment standpoint, we haven't necessarily been chasing growth because there hasn't been growth to chase because of the maturation of technology. That was necessary, right? The maturation of end markets and customers being able to accept and scale with us. And then, of course, there's these regulations that we've spent a lot of time talking about at the outset. So what we have been chasing is really, developing the technologies themselves. And I would argue that we probably have too many technology development companies, right? There's not enough customers for the hundreds or thousands of us who are developing drone technologies to address, right? Because these big customers, can't talk to all of us, right? Regulators can't engage with us, and at the same time, investors can't as well, right? So we've been spreading our customer revenue, which has been precious. Like a lot of it's pilot programs and things like that. We've been spreading that too thinly. We've been spreading investor capital too thinly. We have to concentrate that. So if I look at the from this point and maybe talk about what that investment cycle looks from here, I think you're absolutely correct. We need to be disciplined on how we deploy capital, and I think that's just analysis of, okay, is we're thinking. Well, I'll just give you from my seat, right? Because we have articulated a organic growth story, but also a strategic growth platform. So we have an M&A platform, and as a consolidator, we're going to be trying to focus on the most mature technologies, tapping the most, the biggest end markets we can, and also focused on markets that are going to adopt more quickly than they would otherwise. And very often that gets back to the dual use. That's going to be it's going to be defense, it's going to be public safety and security, it's going to be the critical infrastructure markets who really are poised to adopt. Right, there's national policy imperatives around adopting these technologies, and that's kind of where we're going to focus.
So I love that you just did that. I hope people are going to come back to this video and rewind and play that piece over and over again, because what you've just laid out are mature metrics that people can use to decide what their next steps need to be. I completely 100% agree with you that we've got way too much stuff out there, and it's really hard for any of us normal people to wrap our heads around all of it and what it means and how it maps to our successes. So I love what you just laid out. You've laid out a set of measures that people can use to measure their own progress and their own forward going strategy. So I encourage everybody that's listening. I don't care if you're an investor, if you're a developer, if you're an operator, an OEM, whatever, those metrics will apply to you, because Eric has this uncanny ability to look across the bridge into where that lucrative opportunity is most likely to present itself. So I know I am going to rewind and write those things down so that I have a chance going forward.
That's great, Michelle. Let me kind of pick up on that a little bit. We've all been working. Again, I come back to this because I'm just so impressed. And in a little more context, I've entered the drone business. It was really an extension of our wireless business, which was really designed around critical infrastructure markets, providing private wireless networks, particularly starting with railroads for our Ondas Networks business. But as we were doing that, I was thinking, okay, if we're going to be providing wireless networks, what are we going to attach at the edge? And I kept coming back to the drone, which is incredibly valuable in critical infrastructure markets for security and inspection, right, or intelligence. But I understood the complexity of how you integrate these technologies. Started to learn about it, maybe I don't want to go too far down that tangent, but bring it back to sort of the point and piggyback on what you said. As an industry, we've been working so hard to solve these technical problems, right? And we think about, okay, what's at the end of this, right? It's like, well, it should be nirvana, because we've done something exceptional, and it's just so many. We've done this in so many places, but at the same time, it's like the challenge. What comes next? How do we operationalize that and make it pay off? Make our hard work pay off? And of course, for a lot of us, that's financial, but it's not just financial. It's also we participated in the organic building of this industry. We want to see it succeed. We want to drive. We want to have success. And I think for most of us, we want to have just shared success, right? There's some kinship here. And the whole thing about consolidation is not about, it's not a win or lose thing. It's not like I'm capitulating and I have to throw in with somebody else. It's a huge opportunity, because the companies like Ondas we're at our nascent stage, right? We're just starting to see adoption on our platforms. We have the financial wherewithal. We have the access to capital, which is growth capital, to put that operating platform together. So when we talk to folks about joining either as partners or ecosystem partners, it's not everything doesn't have to be acquired, by the way. You can go to market together. There's all sorts of business structures you can put together. But I really encourage people to do that, because your hard work, if you layer that into an operating platform, your problem's been solved. But you're joining a company that's still here in an industry that's here that can be this. So the professional opportunities along the way are just awesome. And of course, you're also having the opportunity to participate in a company that's going to begin to scale. And as most of us have experienced the various cycles in this industry, again, getting back to what we do is hard. Staying alive has been sort of the key challenge for most of us, right? Just making it through the cycle to the next point where, the funding, from here, as we're growing companies, the professional growth is going to be huge, right? The opportunity for higher incomes, for wealth creation, right? With equity participation is just huge. So the talent is going to win huge. At the same time, the customers are going to benefit because they're going to have a more mature company that they can interface with these complex solutions that are going to continue to evolve, right? There's going to be new requirements. We're going to be able to meet them more readily. Regulators win, investors win. And investors are going to be huge beneficiaries of this with the growth capital because we're going to be building really important and valuable companies together. So I guess consolidation, the knee jerk is it's not about giving up. It's about entering to the next phase. And there's so much success available to us. We got to work together. I'll come back, David, at the outset. This podcast you've put together, it's a critical tool to do that, to bring people together, to build these relationships. And many of us have been doing it for many years.
That's great. Yeah, we've had a few questions come through, but one that just hit, and I wanted you to address it, Eric, just based on what you said. Jerry Green, thanks for asking. He said, "Doesn't consolidation suppress innovation from the smaller startups?" And I didn't hear that from you. I heard, it's going to help all ships rise. But I'm curious, as knowing investment, being an investor yourself, how do you address that?
No, I think absolutely not. This is not a zero-sum game. So this is not about, and I don't think you can bottle up innovation. That's not what it's about. But at the same time, I think, it's incumbent upon us to really step back and say, okay, when we're talking about startups or new innovations, how new are they? How differentiated are they? Right? Because there's a lot of people building a quadcopter, right? So what do you bring to the table? Now, if you can convince, a venture group, an angel group, that you're doing something that's unique, meeting requirements that the market's not, then you should do that. But at the same time, you're going to be, at some point when you're successful building that new technology platform or capability, you're going to have to face that same question. What comes next? And are you going to make those operating investments? Are you going to be able to justify that to growth capital? Maybe you will. Okay. And that's great. So go ahead. At the same time, you may benefit, or you should be looking at this. If companies like Ondas are maturing and becoming scaled, they're going to need the new capabilities you're innovating, right? So these are exits for you. So what I'm talking about is, building these scaled operating companies. There's no way around it, right? These are market forces that are going to force this, and I think we should be very deliberate about putting it together because we're all going to get to a better place faster, than we would otherwise.
So I love that, and that is the lens that I encourage people to take. It's, you may be a small startup, but you have a unique lens, and you've dug into your widget, let's say, like no one else, because it's your passion. And these larger companies that are in the process of scaling, they may not have what you bring. I mean, you just laid that out, Eric, that
Yep.
they are also looking for you. So, Eric, coming from a place of that larger company that's scaling,
Mhm.
what's your advice to these smaller startups? How do they get seen?
It's a good question. I also I don't think there's it's not a difficult answer. It's important, right? I think they need to network. Right? They need to network, and in our industry, we're blessed with openness. Right? There's plenty of people to talk to, relationships to build, and you can very quickly.
So they should call David and get on the podcast.
They should. No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, David's podcast is a huge opportunity for all of us. I mean, I see folks come on. I learn something new all the time, and learn something new, not just about regulations and technology, but about what companies are doing, how problems are being solved, how customers, what customers need, right? So, I think you just have to get out there and you have to be willing to have these conversations. Actually, this leads me to another observation. When I first got involved in the industry, one of the things I did observe is, despite all the networking that happens, there's also this fear of competition, right, or distrust. And because when you're starting in building these businesses from the ground up, you're getting seed capital. Then you're hoping to go to a Series A or at least to a next round, and you're always chronically underfunded, right? And the competition at the point where you're developing technology isn't really to get the next customer; it's to get the next check. Right, so we're very we're careful. We don't want maybe people to know that we're having success, because then they might try to copy us and then get our investors. But I think what I'd say is, as an early stage startup, transparency is probably going to help you more than it hurts. Right, if you're open, you're sharing your problems, you're sharing your successes, you're sharing your roadmap, you're going to get more engagement. And it's not all about even the check. It's about partnerships and ecosystem, folks who can add something to your business. So, I think it's just, sort of putting yourself out there, willing to collaborate, and where you can be, if your instincts are to close up and not share, try to challenge those. Maybe you should be more transparent, more open, more engaging.
Yeah, there's a certain listener out there whose initials are BS, which is ironic because he's one of the one of my favorite speakers of truth, is that we are all stronger together. And the
Bingo.
aviation, legacy aviation proved that when they stood up what we now call collaborative decision making, CDM. It's like Google. It's a verb. It's a noun. It's a program. But by practicing CDM, collaborative decision making, the airlines got stronger together. Their situational awareness vastly improved, and they were able to do more things to affect their bottom line by sharing more information with one another. It wasn't necessarily intuitive at the beginning,
Yeah.
but I'll tell you now, they can't do without it, and we would not want them to do without it. Bringing that same kind of mentality into this sector, I think, is imperative. So I'm really appreciative that you brought it out.
Sure. Yeah.
It's funny how all that works, man. Just like, younger in my career, I've noticed that same trend. And like, I learned this phrase that said, if you hide your strategy so much from your competitors, if you're so fearful of that, that's what drives you. Most of your coworkers or employees might not even know what your strategy is, and your own team might not know what your strategy is at that level. But the opposite is to build a fire so big that your competitors come there to get warm. Is the way I've heard it worded, and that's one of my favorite phrases, really, that I live by. In many senses, even the podcast itself. I can't tell you how many of my direct competitors have walked up to me, shake my hand, and said, "Hey, thanks for what you're doing with the podcast." And it's funny. It's just like, dude, it's just conversations. It's just information. It's not like we're all going into like the secret sauce of our patent or something on the back end, but it's just like, how do we help each other? How do we understand each other? And it's been really, really fun and actually really effective.
Love it. That's those are great anecdotes, and very powerful. And let me also add this. I'll come back to it. I'll put my financial hat on again. The markets are massive, right? No one's going to get it all, right? So the more we can work together to grow the pie faster, there's enough pie. There's more than enough pie. So let's grow the pie. Let's grow the pie, and that's how we approach all the relationships we have, wherever possible. To our direct competitors, we have some. But at the same time, we're all a little bit differentiated enough on whatever levels that comes, that we have more to gain. Like, let's take this, the Part 108 and the rulemaking. A bunch of competitors are going to get together, and there's going to be some fights and disagreements, but collectively, we all know that the Part 108 will be hugely beneficial, right? So let's go the right way.
100%. Do you have anything that you can, little seeds that you could drop? I don't know what all you could share, but just thoughts on what Ondas is looking for next. If there are startups, if there's people out there with certain skill sets, certain products are developing, are there things you can share as to, what you guys kind of have an ear to the ground for right now to solve for, perhaps? Or
I will. So I'll say a couple things. Firstly, we've defined our markets as defense and security technology, right? So, and of course, security goes from public safety. Let's talk about there's military, there's homeland security, there's public safety, then there's critical infrastructure protection. So it's defense technology. So that by definition is not just stuff that flies. Now we do start with drones and aerial capabilities. That's really going to be a focus. But you can see us get involved in ground elements as well and others, components, critical components, valuable systems, I'd say. And then the second distinction is to understand where we are in the industry and what we're trying to achieve. We're making that transition to becoming an operating company and a growth company. And what that means is when we're thinking about consolidation, we need to look at mature technology and services. Maybe I'll come back to services. This is important as well. It has to be mature. It has to be scalable today. That doesn't mean that sort of the innovator, the early stage folks we don't want to work with or can't, but we'd approach that a little differently. It might be through partnerships or maybe even small investments. But to really to do consolidation, we have to look at mature companies who you can deploy the growth capital to really start to put a revenue a hockey stick in. And then I'll come back to services, David. This is another place where I think it can be misunderstood, especially by investors, but I think even across the industry. So you look at most industrial sectors or just sectors of the economy, and people think services like, low multiple, right? It's sort of, it's not recurring necessarily. It's we bill by man hours, etc. I think when you're thinking about where we are as an industry, really dominated by where most of the investment's gone, it's been investment in developing of technologies and capabilities, right? And the services element is a capital light element because if you're providing drone services, you got to pay your payroll every 2 weeks. So, in any event, they're just different models. However, if you are building this scale operating company, I think the services element is really critical to us. So we look to partner. You may see us, interested in acquisitions around services as well, because if we have that operating platform and we can plug that's scaled today, and trusted relationships with customers in the end markets, trusted relationships with regulators, some unique subject matter expertise in different verticals and applications and use cases. We'll be bringing our platform technologies and growing them faster if we have those people in the field able to support it.
That's cool. That's pretty exciting. Let's move a little bit into modular systems, ecosystem, leadership. Kind of the last main section here we wanted to talk about. So across the industry, there's a growing momentum around modularity, whether hardware, data layers, software. And you've talked a bit about, like when you pull the complexities of all that together and operationalize it, that's a whole different ballgame. That's a huge moat, per se, that you guys have. Curious in terms of modularity and sensors and all those pieces, why does that matter now, especially in a world where system interoperability, one of Michelle's favorite words, is becoming a strategic asset?
Right. Yeah, good question. So, I'll say modularity is really critical on many levels, more often than not. Okay, it's what it allows you to do is provide the lowest cost solutions, but also with flexibility. And if you're going to be delivering technology platforms at scale, the cost of the system is a really important part of that. And customers, by and large, they get concerned about proprietary systems and lock-in because they don't have that ability to evolve. So. And I'd also say, because of that reality, investors are really, increasingly looking at. They believe that's a market requirement So you want to be your cost of capital for a modular capability is critical. I'll give you an example. For Monda. So our Iron Drone Raider platform, as I said at the outset, is designed to protect from the threat of hostile or intruder drones.
Yeah. Let's show that again, by the way. I didn't call this out, but it's in the middle of the screen, in the center, underneath the platform, the small, I think, black, right?
Yeah, black.
Drone right there.
Yep, right under what's the term? It's unleashing American drone dominance. So it was great. We got some good pictures of that. But that system is designed. It's purpose built. Right, it's a low, what we call low kinetic. So this is a drone fully autonomous. We've got a sensor package on the Raider, the Iron Drone Raider, that allows it to go out and hunt. Right, locates in space the threat that you want to neutralize, and it'll track it and hunt it and capture it. And it throws a net. The net can have a parachute. It'll come down, and I say that's built for purpose on two levels. Firstly, Iron Drone is part of multi-layered security. And typically, we're going to be deploying that layer of security around critical locations in population centers. So it might be a stadium, a military base, an airport, a maritime port, maybe an oil refinery, where you don't want things to blow up. You're concerned about collateral impact. So we'll intercept that Iron Drone. I'm sorry, to deploy the Iron Drone, and it'll neutralize or mitigate the threat through interception. At the same time, and again, this is critical, we're putting a business together. We know that certain customers have a requirement, and they're less concerned about low collateral impact. Oh, let me also add, I'm sorry, David, on the Iron Drone, there's also an economic reason to do this. When you blow up a drone on another drone to protect as a different form of interception, the drone, the Raider itself, you lose it, so you have to buy another one. So after we're deploying with the net, we can come back, you put another net into the UAV, and we can go again. So the economic case, it's less costly to defend these critical locations with a net-based system. But there's certain areas we're going to deploy that are less concerned about collateral impact, and we might want to get or have to defend against larger targets where net may not be the most effective. So we're going to we can put a munition on this. Now, if we were purpose built just for a net, we wouldn't have that ability to extend that same platform for a new market, right? This is essentially what I'm talking about is Iron Drone Raider. We're going to have a new platform, okay? And we did that with very minimal incremental investment. So the ROI from that platform is huge for our investors, and that's an advantage for us. And it's also an advantage for our customers, right? The customers want to have the system they can deploy with multiple, with at least a roadmap and a capability. All things being equal, it's preferred to have that ability to evolve.
Totally. And when you talk about mixed or dual use, commercial and military, perhaps one day, I won't speak too firmly to this, but as mitigation may become available to critical infrastructure, or that there's a lot of caveats, a lot of legalities.
There are.
But in a world in the future where if mitigation were legal to for a critical infrastructure location, and they could use this non-kinetic approach, let's say a prison, that I could envision this. Again, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not saying this is legal today, but I could envision a world in which, a radar picks up a drone, camera slews, gets a visual of it, operator, checks that alert, checks that visual, says validated threat, confirmed threat, payload hanging from the drone entering the grounds of, this prison yard, whatever they need to do for that sort of chain of custody and to prove that they're, the use of force or whatever the case, then send this, Iron Drone, capture the nefarious drone without blowing it up. And this is yet another reason to not have that kinetic or explosive element, is that they can then use it as evidence, and run forensics on the drone and actually uncover, say, like a large, cartel network, or things that we've seen them do that with drones that have crashed, for prison networks, right, in the past, that have had really big issues with contraband delivery. So imagine if you could proactively capture it, bring it back, use the forensics so a lot of these folks will fly test flights from their own house. And like they themselves will be in the video. Their address on their mailbox will be literally in the video, all still stored on the drone. They don't even realize it. And so getting a hold of those drones is incredibly helpful to uncover these big networks of, nefarious actors. So I could think, that being a reason. And then secondly, the low collateral, maybe, things, pieces and parts aren't falling on people in other, over an electric utility that could cause issues, over an oil refinery that could cause explosions, over a stadium that couldn't hit people and, hurt people. So who knows? Perhaps the non-kinetic element helps soften the blow, helps maybe, regulation to shape around that, in a commercial setting a little bit more readily.
Yeah, and I do believe that, and as you're well aware, as much as anybody, you do know that public safety organizations, particularly the more sophisticated, are looking to be able to utilize these tools, right? These in multi-layered counter-drone tools. And I think there's reason to be optimistic because the Trump executive orders gave clear direction to to allow more permissions here. So we'll have to see how that transpires over the next year.
Yeah, we did hear from DHS. Mary Rupert was kind enough to join us at the AUVSI UAS and AAM Policy Symposium recently, and she and I were talking kind of afterwards after her panel, and they have been very deliberate about putting the appropriate amount of resources on crafting that language, and it's not easy. The perspectives that are thrown at her come from every different angle, but they're getting close, and she feels, at least she relayed to me, that she's feeling comfortable that they're finding a landing place, and we will have something to review coming very soon. So that's all positive.
Yeah.
But regardless of even that, we've been talking a lot about the platforms themselves, and your platform's only as good as your weakest component, right? Because as soon as that one thing breaks.
Mm-hmm.
So from your perspective with Ondas Holdings, you've got multiple platforms that serve multiple missions.
Yep.
So how are you balancing your focus on the platforms with making sure that you've got components in those platforms of the highest integrity? Because that's not cheap either. How do you balance all of that?
No, it's not cheap, and of course, it's become even more complex than we may have thought a few years ago, right? With the geopolitical aspect of this, which I referred to earlier, made in America, the NDA compliance, etc. So, that's a common challenge. I am probably more optimistic than most, and I say that kind of deploying again, my investor hat. I've seen a lot of technology cycles and a lot of investment cycles, and I think people are underestimating our drone economy's ability to create the supply chain. And I guess what I'll say is, we clearly see the elements. I would say this: the boom on the commercial drone, and certainly on the military, homeland security, defense, etc. The boom's already started. Because there's so many of our companies out here, it hasn't shown up. We haven't built really big drone companies yet, but we are in the process of doing that. And with things like this Part 108 and all the technology maturation and market, this growth and this visibility, these demand signals, and this unambiguous policy supporting what we do is catalyzing massive investment. Right, you can see it. It's great. It's going to be deployed very, very productively. But what that means is that signal is not just coming, on a single technology, a drone, or even sector. What it's doing is it's also empowering, the supply chain to react. Because they know the customers are going to be there. They know more drones are going to fly. So there's a lot of investment in the supply chain that's happening. And I think there's going to be a flywheel effect. There's going to be the more investment capital and the more revenue and profitability we start generating as an industry, that's going to feed into more volumes. More volumes is going to have that same dynamic. It's going to be more capital coming to the supply chain. And I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. We've built many new technology economies, whether it's, and I'll reference the supply, say social media, the internet, all these wireless networks. And, we know how to do it. And I think it's just sort of, I think getting back to it, I think a lot of us in these seats are saying, this is a massive problem, right? So I said, near the beginning of our conversation, we don't have to have 1 million drones flying tomorrow, right? We're going to build the supply chain. We're going to build the talent base. We're going to build all these operational capabilities as the customers, sort of adopt, right, in parallel. And every year that's going to compound, and we're going to build a bigger supply chain, a more robust, more resilient supply chain. I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about it.
And back to the points about all ships rising, about everything you said about let's work together in the industry, not hold our cards too close, because we need the overall demand, the overall buying signals, the overall money in on both sides.
David, this is great. It comes back to consolidation. So if we have fragmented, single revenue, poorly capitalized drone technology providers, service providers, we're not aggregating scale that can support the supply chain, because the manufacturing base, the component folks can't sell to all these. They can't get funding if all their customers are Series A or angel backed, right? But as we put growth capital together, start building scaled companies, we see the path to this S curve of adoption, which is inevitable. It's happening, right? That's going to encourage capital to be deployed in the supply chain.
Wow.
So consolidation is inevitable.
Awesome, guys. Well, we're right at the top of the hour here. For everybody, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Eric, for just being a guest here and being a friend of the podcast, bringing incredible wisdom and advice.
It's a pleasure.
Much appreciated.
Awesome, guys. Well, we'll see you again next week live, This Week in Drones. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care.